the narrative. I feel as though it's important to shape our own narrative as African American males and African American females in America because the way that we're portrayed in media, the way we're portrayed in movies, at least up till this point where we're getting some different things going on and able to tell a different side of our history and experiences, which is new. The narrative, my version, is really a book that's about questions. And I ask these questions, like, why is the gangster narrative so important, and why is it dominating every, form of black expression from, music, TV, and film, etc. And there's an album that goes with it. They're both called The Narrative, Life and the Pains of a Black Man. So
Just wanted to ask you some questions about the writing process for narrative. So just want to start with the question: have you gone on any literary pilgrimages?
yeah, it's funny. Like, when you hear that question, that you think literary pilgrimages, you think of somewhere really far off, or, But for the most part, I went to North Philly, South Philly. I actually went to Baltimore, L.A., New York, Brooklyn, Bronx, different areas. Just kind of like talking to different people about the same thing, and like what's their experience with the narrative, or what's their experience with or their idea of the narrative, or how they view themselves, or how they view the world. Um, I talk to like kids even. Young black girls. I asked them like, what do they think when they hear the term "bitches ain't shit," and they had their own perspective on it, like of saying that how they weren't a bitch, or how they saw women that were perceived as bitches, and it really was their perception of a woman being a bitch was a woman that was actually being promiscuous at that age, and that's kind of how their view of it was. And then I talked to some young kids, like African American males, young guys, and their perspective on the bitches ain't shit narrative was funny because of it was all based off heartbreak. Which was really sad. Like it was all like when I was 13, I was dating this girl and she broke my heart. So on these different little journeys where we went and we talked to different people, we were able to collect different people's perspectives on these different ideas.
And speaking of heartbreak, what's the first book that made you cry?
Huh? The first book that made me cry, I would have to say, The Alchemist, maybe, because it's like when you just get like such a feeling that just kind of comes over you when you relate to something, and it's almost like a revelation almost that you have, and you don't really get that feeling from many books or many albums or many movies, and there's always something that's special. So that's a great question to ask.
And if people aren't familiar, can you just give us what's the gist of the story of the Alchemist?
I mean, The Alchemist is a story of basically journeying, not being afraid to leave home, not being afraid to venture out and experience something that you were never going to experience. It's alchemy is basically a story of turning metal to gold, and it's a learning experience, and knowing when you actually ready to actually take what you've learned and put it into action. And I mean, it's just an overall great story.
And would you say that writing energizes or exhausts you?
I mean, that's a good question too. It's different, for me, I'm always typically what I'm writing is a rap song, So this is the first book that I've basically ever written, ever even. I never tried to write a book before. This is just my first try, my first book. So it was very energizing, I would say, because I was excited to get my thoughts out, and in a different forum than just even writing a song. But even though I get excited with both, so I would definitely say it energizes me.
And would you say that there are some common traps for aspiring writers? Like this is your first book. Did you find that there was anything that kind of tripped you up that you would want to warn other first time writers about?
Oh yeah, definitely. Auto correct sometimes doesn't autocorrect. You know, it'll give you a different word. Something that may trip a lot of people up, or that tripped me up at least, was, going through the proofreading process. Giving the book to people to read, and then they come back and say, "Oh, the book is great," and then you go through them like, "Wait, there's some mistakes." And even just working with different editors, they may add different things to the story that you don't want in there, so you have to take it out. So I mean, it's everything is set to trip an artist up when creating a project, even from album to book to movie to TV, whatever you want to do. There's always going to be pitfalls.
Would you say that you've encountered any unethical practices in the publishing industry?
On the music publishing side, no. I have a great publishing company, Domino Music Publishing. I mean, those guys are top notch. It's a British company. I mean, I just can't say enough good about them. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's one of my best business experiences ever, But, I mean, on the book publishing side, I would say that there's some unethical things, like people want you to do a tell-all book. People, they want you to, slander people in a book. People want you to, they want to talk about sex in the book, and it may break up relationships. I mean, stuff like that. I mean, so there's all kind of unethical practices that I see in book publishing, but I haven't been, a victim of any of that. I mean, usually people come to me and they just, they never asked me to write a book. So, my book is self-published and everything. So I was able to take creative liberty and do whatever I wanted to do. Yeah.
Would you say that having a big ego helps or hurts a writer?
That's an interesting question. I would say that having a big ego can help, because it's, having a big ego, it makes you not judge what you're doing to the point where someone that's a perfectionist, or that's like putting their work under scrutiny, and that's really trying to make something that's really going to be perfect and really concerned about their work. I think the artist with the ego, it's kind of like, hey, whatever I write is going to be good, so just take it and deal with it. And I think that's good. But on the other hand, I think that that's good, because it may stop a writer from having writer's block. But I mean, that's the only good I would say that comes out of that. And I think being a little bit more concerned about what you're writing, it lets you know that what you're doing is from the heart, and it's more of who you are as a person versus what you think you should just deliver to people who are just waiting for you to write something, and then it's like, hey, here you go, everyone, please enjoy, versus like, yo, what do you think? Here's a question versus here's the answer. You know what I mean? So,
would you say that you have a writing kryptonite? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, my writing kryptonite is my kryptonite is my kryptonite. So it's like, I'm not going to tell everybody on camera what my kryptonite is, but my kryptonite, it stops me from writing, it stops me from doing everything, it stops me from doing anything, because it's fucking kryptonite, you know what I mean? But I'm not going to tell you.
Do you try to be more original, or to deliver to readers what they want?
Yeah, I try to always be original in everything that I do. And it's hard to deliver to readers what I think that they want, because I don't write from a satisfactory perspective. I'm not trying to satisfy anyone's particular palate on anything in particular. Like, what I'm doing is I'm telling you what's on my mind. You know what I mean? I'm telling the world, this is how I feel. I don't know if you feel the same way, or if you felt the same way, but maybe if you have, then maybe this book will mean something to you.
Are you friends with other authors, and do they help you become a better writer?
Yeah, a lot of my friends have actually written books. Of course, Questlove has written 4 books. I mean, all New York Times top sellers. I mean, not to brag, but I mean, that's what he did. It's a very, very good friend of mine. Dr. James Peterson has written a couple of books. A very good friend of mine too. Rennie Harris, Pure Movement, has written books. Rachel Gonza has written many books and is a literary winner of Pulitzer Awards and all kind of stuff. I mean, we grew up in the same studio together, basically. Um, yeah, a lot of my friends have had published books. Yeah.
And have they helped you become a better writer? Have
Oh
they
yeah,
influenced you,
definitely.
given you advice?
Well, I think just seeing them write a book, it just was like, if everybody else is writing a book, let me give it a shot because I have something I want to say as well. You know what I mean? And it makes it easier. And of course, what your friends do, typically, you can kind of get into it a little easier. You know what I mean? So.
Did the writing experience match or contrast with your expectations before you started of like what the process of writing a book, your first book, would be like? Was it about what you thought it was going to be, or was it different than what you thought it was going to be?
Oh, okay, got you. Writing a book is definitely what I thought it was going to be. Going into it, I knew it was going to be a lot of hard work. I knew it was going to be a lot of tedious, going back, checking punctuation and the way things are spelled because I'm a horrible speller. Things like that. It was a lot of hard work, and it's exactly what I expected it to be. The actual getting the book, manufactured is a little bit easier. It's just like a matter of just choices of hardback, softback, and that kind of thing. Illustrations, artwork, things that are going to accompany the book, how to package the album and the book together. I mean, those things are kind of like not what I expected to be, and there's a lot of different avenues you can take to do that. So it's kind of interesting.
What was the best money you ever spent as a writer?
The best money I ever spent as a writer. Well, I'll tell you, the best money that I spent writing this book was actually going to a strip club and actually talking to strippers and getting their take on the whole bitches ain't shit narrative. And I mean, it was the best money I spent as far as a lot of different reasons, just the experience overall and actually having that conversation with people who actually get called bitch on a regular basis and how they interpreted it. So it just was very interesting.
Do you have any authors that you disliked at first but eventually grew to like?
I mean, authors of not books, no, but people who may have wrote some articles I may have not liked and then met them and then was like, oh, well, they're not as bad as I thought they were, type of thing. And, other artists, like, hip hop artists, like I've met hip hop artists who at first I didn't like their music. And then when I hung out with them, I was like, yo, man, I love this guy. You know what I'm saying? But
what was an early experience where you learned that language and words had power?
I would say when I was about 14 years old, actually where I was discovered, it was a talent show. And I told everybody in the talent show, I said, I was going to win. Like everybody that was signing up and filling out their little application forms or whatever, I told everybody that I was going to win. And at the time, I don't really remember how I felt when I was saying it. Like, did I really feel like I was going to win? Or was I saying it just because I was being just like, I was like a little arrogant kind of little kid. And I just can't remember the energy that was behind it. But I said it, and I said it, and I said it, and I said it, and I told everybody I was going to win. And then I won. And that was the first time I said to myself, even as a young person, I said, well, I told everybody I was going to win, and then I won. I was like, that's interesting. I was like, I always thought that was connected some way, even though I really didn't know if it was connected, but I felt like it was, But now I know that words and energy and the universe and what we put out there, it becomes a ripple effect, and I know all that stuff now. Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about this, but maybe you can talk a bit more. What kind of research did you do for this book? How long did you spend doing it before you got started?
You know what? I actually didn't spend a lot of time before I got started writing the book, like doing a lot of research. But while I was writing it, I did a lot of research. Like I was saying earlier, I talked to kids, young black males. I talked to young black females. I went to the strip club. I talked to Grouchy Greg of allhiphop.com. I talked to Dr. Janice Johnson Um, I talked to Taib Smith. I talked to Wallow 267. I talked to real gangsters in the street. And I talked to teachers and philosophers. Like Phil Brown at Shipley School, another one of my colleagues. It was a very ongoing conversation with a lot of different people that actually influenced a lot of what's in the book.
So, what would literary success look like to you?
Well, literary success, of course, New York Times top seller, but that's public accolades. I mean, just people reading a book and getting a better understanding of what the Black American experience is like in America, opening up expression to a wider playing field, I would say, of emotions for Black artists, because I feel like we don't really have that much range, to perform. We're very pigeonholed to, the gangster narrative, the street narrative, the hip hop lifestyle. I mean, it's such a dominating force, and I love it, and I represent that. But at the same time, there's so many different other things. There's other topics. There's other emotions besides anger and wanting to spend a lot of money. I mean, there's just so much more to Black America. You know what I mean? And I think that that's drowned out by this other voice. But there's so many other different voices that could even be as powerful as some of these other voices. But these other voices and what they represent and their influence on the overall American music market or entertainment market, as far as Black Americans, is uneven.
Do you view writing as a kind of a spiritual practice at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I write is definitely spiritual, because I mean, even with some of my music, I talk about God a lot. And it's not like I'm going in it to say something that is faith based, but it's almost like it's going in there on its own, And I look back on it and I'm like, wow, that's very interesting perspective on God or religion that I just put in it. But I'm like, well, I wasn't even thinking about that. And it's almost like, at some points I feel like I'm being, used as a tool, by a higher power, what I mean, to do the work that I do. It's just interesting, how much of impact, like I'll do something and then I'll look back on it, I'm like, wow, that helped this person, that helped that person, this helped this person, that helped that person, even like with The Last Jimmy or Henry Box Brown or, the Last Jimmy soundtrack, the work that we did, the people that we connected to, it was all such a learning experience, and it continues to be. So it's definitely something spiritual and what's going on with the way that I write and what I try to bring forth artistically. Definitely.
What would you say is the most difficult thing about writing about people from the opposite sex?
Well, for me, it was very easy because I have a lot of female friends, and I was raised by a lot of different women, so I understand how to communicate with women probably a little bit better than the average male. So even with writing about them, I was just very careful about what I say. You know what I mean? Because with women, you got to be very careful about what you say. And I mean, you could say, you could say, hey, what's going on with your hair? Did you like your wind blew or something? I'd say, what do you mean? Do I not look right? You're like, oh no, you look great. But I'm just saying, like the wind. I mean, you can't say anything. You know what I mean? You got to be very, very careful. And with such a touchy, just phrase as bitches ain't shit. To put that in a book and have that as one of the chapter titles is very touchy because, I don't even say bitch on any of my records. Like, I just never said that. But what I wanted to talk about is how impactful just that phrase has been on an overall community and an overall narrative of women in hip hop. You know what I mean? And the disrespect and the actual love. Because, at one point there was this love element and that love element was removed. and replaced with just bitches ain't shit, to the point though now women call themselves bitches on record, you know what I'm saying, in public. When you look at, you know, hip hop housewives and all those different things, the overarching narrative for that show is bitch, you know. So I thought it was important to actually address it, and by all means necessary. So you know, I went into it with a little hesitation because, you know, I know that the opposite sex can be very sensitive, but we have to be understanding to that sensitivity, and that's why, you know, it came off the way it did.
What did you edit out of this book?
I mean, there's a lot that was edited out of the book, you know. I mean, for obvious reasons too, you know, of not wanting to offend and wanting to keep the message clear and wanting to keep the focus on exactly what I was talking about. A lot of great writing was done just with this whole idea just involving this whole idea, and everything didn't make it into the book, you know, which a lot of stuff that I wanted to make it in, it didn't make it in. So
what period of your life would you say that you would write about the most often? Like when you're really young, child or a teenager, young adult, or more like contemporary?
Well, I don't really write about myself particularly, except in music. So when I'm writing about myself, I'm pretty much writing about my current self or my childhood. Yeah, so.
Do you think that when your book comes out, you'll read the book reviews that people will write about it?
Hell yeah, because, you know, I definitely want to know what people are going to say about the book. But, you know, I'm not going to let it affect me. If people are like, yo, Dice, you know, we don't like your book, it's like, oh, okay, you have your right to your opinion, and I'm fine with that. But at the same time, I think that that's not why I wrote it in the first place, was for a critic to critique it and say, hey, it's good or bad. No, I'm addressing what's going on in my community. I'm addressing something that's true to my heart. You know what I mean? So if someone says they don't like it, then it's just like, oh, well, okay.
Do you Google yourself?
I do Google myself. You know what I mean? Like, but that's just to make sure, you know, nothing's popping up that I don't want on Wikipedia, you know, stuff like that.
What would you say was one of the hardest topics to write about in the book, and why was it difficult to write about?
I think the hardest topic to write about in the book was actually talking about Drake, you know, because I don't know this guy, you know what I mean? But his influence on the market, I feel, or not his influence on the market, but I actually think Drake's influence on black culture in the last, you know, 7, 8 years that he's been making songs publicly, I think it's been positive. And I think that some of these things change the narrative. Some of these things help change the narrative, but at the same time, they're still using this platform of gangsterism to support what they're doing. Like, you know, I talk about Drake, I talk about Kanye West, I talk about Pharrell, who I think are three people who were very important in changing the way that people actually look at African Americans, and actually changing the way that African American males look at themselves, you know, because, you know, you can't say that Kanye or Drake or Pharrell, you can't say that they are not hip hop, you know, so you can't take anything that, you know, people consider to be credible about a black male in America, or if, you know, you can't take that away from these particular people, but at the same time, they have this other thing that is still like, they're still kind of like gangster. They still want to have gangster friends. They still want to say gangster things. And I think that's the part that was hard for me, is writing the book, because, you know, the respect that I have for these people, but at the same time, criticizing them. You know, I mean, that was a very hard part, you know.
Are there any little secrets or like secret references in your book that only a few people will understand or find?
No, not really. I mean, it's very direct. You know, it's like I try not to write from that even perspective of something and making anything too personal. I mean, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And I mean, I guess the main reason is because I think we have enough people who just create things and talk about themselves. especially in the art form that I'm most comfortable with, which is hip hop, and the thing that I do the most. And so definitely what I'm trying to do is take myself out of it and put, a different spin on it. You know what I mean? And not make myself the focus point. Like, what I did with Jimmy's Back is mass incarceration. It's about privatized prisons. It's not about me. When I talk about, on the project Henry Box Brown, I'm talking about a slave who mailed himself from Virginia to Philadelphia. I'm not talking about me. And even on this project, I'm talking about African American. Well, actually, I am, because no matter how removed you may be from a particular lifestyle of, selling drugs or being a part of a criminal enterprise or something like that, like, when you're removed from that lifestyle, it still does, and you're black, it still doesn't take you off of the police's radar. You know what I'm saying? It still doesn't mean that you're not going to get, arrested for, a small infraction. It still doesn't mean the police are not going to be called on you. Someone may call the police on you. It doesn't mean that, you know what I mean? So it's like you have law-abiding, African American citizens who wake up and are way more straight edge than I am, who when the cops pull behind them, they still have to check their rearview mirror and they get nervous, And I think like that is what I was trying to talk about in this particular book, and what I'm trying to address, and why I don't make things so personal, because there's something bigger that's going on in even myself.
What would you say was the most difficult part of the writing process?
The most difficult part of the writing process is really just buckling down when you have so many different things going on and remembering to write. It's like, okay, I have to write today. I have to finish this chapter today. I have to move on. I have to start another chapter today. I mean, that's kind of like the real hard part, especially when you have, album and, other production things that you have to do. When you're working on a play or musicals, when you have a personal life. So, I mean, all those things come into play and can make doing anything hard. But that was the most difficult part about the book, was just actually remembering to write it.
And kind of in the same idea, but as far as your music goes, what's the most difficult part of your artistic process when it comes to making music?
My most difficult part of the artistic process is really when you hit the playback, and because it's like once I hear my own voice, it's like I have a chance to now criticize what I just did or critique it, or I have to actually find what's wrong with myself. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's like always the most interesting part about, doing anything that's creative, and then going back and looking at it, because now you basically have to find what's wrong with you. You know what I mean? As a lack of a better way of saying it. Or not even what's wrong with you, but find what you can do to make you better. You know what I'm saying? It's a better way to look at it, but it's really you. If you're shooting something, if you're making a song, if you're, baking a cake, you know what I'm saying, and the cake comes out lopsided, it's okay, what did I do wrong here? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I mean, that's always the hardest part, I feel like, for creative types, you know what I mean?
And can you tell me a little bit about how the book and the album play off each other, and what sort of value someone might get experiencing them both that they wouldn't if they only did one or the other?
Well, okay. I think that if a person only experiences one or the other, I think that they'll get it equally, what I'm trying to bring forth, because this is not a typical album. Like, I was going to make the album almost impossible to skip past, and people would just have to listen to it entirely as one icon. But then I was like, well, that might just be too much for some people to take. So I want to make sure that people can actually rewind and go back, because if they have that power, then they will actually there will be no disconnect between the actually what you'll get from reading the book and what you get from the album. Now, of course, they're two different, expressions, but they're both expressing the same thing, and we're both trying to bring out the same idea of, basically what's wrong with America, and how come Black Americans can only be seen through this one particular lens. and that's criminality. And how come we accept it?
What was your thinking behind having a Nina Simone cover going on? What was going through your head when you made that decision?
You know, I was working on a project about Nina Simone, and I was listening to all her music, and I came across a poem a poem that was written in the early 1900s that she actually sang, and the way she sang it to me, I wanted to give that same kind of emotion, and I knew that I was writing a book and the album together. So this is the part where it kind of starts, and you can kind of feel like, okay, this is making a lot of sense to me. Like, okay, please read me is what the poem is basically repeating, and what she was singing, and it has a very interesting narrative that kind of correlates with the perception of someone who is trying to be greater and is using the assistance of someone else as help. Someone else is helping this person be great, and this person is ready to embark on something bigger than what they've already been experiencing. And the "Please Read Me" lyric, I think, it just connects so well with the book and the album.
It's pretty much impossible to not have strong opinions about Donald Trump right now. And you decided to include a speech of his as an intro. So can you just tell me a little bit about your thinking behind that? Like, what did that mean to you, and why did you choose to do that?
Yeah, a lot of times when people hear it, the actual clip that I used from Donald Trump, they don't believe that he actually even said what he said, which is typical for Donald Trump in a lot of different cases. The reason why I wanted to use this actual particular clip is because he is addressing Black America in a way that I've never really heard a politician address Black America. And to me, I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter in the least bit, And the thing that really stood out to me though was how disrespectful and how angry his direction was to Black America. Like, I mean, he said that he wants everyone from Black America to go out and vote for him, and here's why. And he didn't say one thing that he was going to do to help Black America, but he wanted to decide to point out what he thought was wrong with Black America, and then I give my opinion in the next song, "Life and Opinions of a Black Man."
Do you feel like Trump can kind of be like a stand-in for like the white establishment, for like authority, for like cops, law and order, like that kind of thing? Like, is that like one way that the Black America views Trump potentially?
I think that, at one point, Black America, we like Trump. If you think about Donald Trump and how many shout outs he's got in rap songs, it's just amazing. I mean, they talk about Donald Trump as much as they talk about Grey Poupon. You know what I'm saying? And to your point, I think all of those things kind of connect. I think Donald Trump, I think Grey Poupon, I think police, the old style of policing, the old regime of politics, the old regime of how deals are done, the old regime of working with the Teamsters, the old regime of just how someone would view America of a person who is almost 80 years old. I mean, he is the sum of those things. I mean, he is the dirty cop. He is the dirty politician. He is the dirty Teamster guy. He is the dirty union guy. He is the dirty landlord. You know what I'm saying? He's the dirty everything. I mean, he's the sum of America. And I mean, not all and I mean good and bad. I mean, for when you think about what the purpose of being in America is, and you think about entrepreneurship, you know what I'm saying? And that's a quote from Dick Gregory. He's like, "Yo, if you're in America, then you should be living, and you should be focused on entrepreneurship, or else you could just live somewhere else." You know what I'm saying? Because that's what this is all about. And when you think about a person like Donald Trump, and I mean, he's the dirty everything. He's the dirty husband. He's the dirty friend. You know, he has dirty legal deals. He does his mistress dirty. You know what I'm saying? It's even the person he's cheating on his wife, and the person that he's cheating on her, he's cheating on her. This is what we have. You know, so I think the way that Black America views Donald Trump, I don't think they view Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is just he just blends in. You know, when we actually talk about Black America engaging in a political thing, I think that's a whole even deeper conversation. But I mean, Donald Trump, he just blends in. You know, all the politicians, they just blend in. You know, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, you know, Marco Rubio, you know, I mean, all of those guys, they're just background noise for what's actually going on that actually affects people. And you know, I don't think Black America views Donald Trump. I think they hate him, but I think they hate him now because we basically been taught to hate him. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody hates Donald Trump. He fucked his shit up. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, he had the shirts, he had the cufflinks, you know what I'm saying? He had the TV show The Apprentice. I mean, he ruined his brand. And you know, and I think that's how they view him. I think that's how the world views him. He's as a broken brand. But he has the job, you know what I mean? So
you chose to include Bilal on a track on your new record called "Fix It." Can you tell me a little bit about that and what he brought to the table?
yeah, actually Bilal, he's actually on two songs. He's on a song called Quicksand. And I'm glad you actually did bring that up. You know, he brought a lot to the table. I mean, just as being like such a unique uh, individual and perspective on just life in general, and of course what's going on in the African American community, which you already know that's no secret where his heart is. The song Quicksand though actually features him and Ali Miller, and quicksand is basically what it is. It's quicksand, and the streets are kind of being described as like this never able to get out kind of thing. Like every time you try to move further out of the streets, it kind of pulls you back in, and that's like the quicksand, you know, metaphor. And then Fix It. I mean, Fix It comes in later on the record, and you know he's basically saying like there's a lot of things going on in America, and he's like, you know, if this has been broke, we've been broke, we're broken people, we're on broken land, but I think it's time we fix it, you know. And I think like that speaks to just everyone, you know, not just even Black America, but you know, just culturally, you know, what's going on overseas, and you know, putting children inside cages, and you know, 1,500 missing immigrants displaced, you know. It speaks about what's going on in Flint, Michigan, when people can't get good water. You know, it speaks to what's going on with the Me Too movement, and just like all these different things that are just broken. And Bilal just comes in and say, "I think it's time we fix it." I mean, it's just such a simple phrase. Just fix it. It's broken. Let's fix it. It's just that's just all you want to hear. You know what I'm saying? Like when someone gives you when you tell somebody like, "Yo, I got a problem," you know, blah 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 blah. You know, this is what's going on at work or with an employee or even a relationship. And the person says, "Let's just fix it," even if it's as small as ordering a meal, you know, and you're not happy with what you get, and then you know the manager at the restaurant, you say, "Hey, I didn't like this, I didn't like that." He says, "I'll fix it," and he brings you a new one. You know, I mean, fixing it. Let's just fix it. America's broke. The narrative is broke. What's going on in the judicial system is broke. You know what happened with Meek Mills is broke. You know, everything's broke. So we got to fix it.